Also with us, we have some of the speakers of the other panels that wanted to join us. We have Alejandra Teles, we have Ranko Milik, and actually Ethan is going to talk about regenerative agriculture, biodiversity in planetary health, the product revolution in food, beauty, and fashion. Wow, such a great name, this topic. And so Ethan actually is a farmer, is upstate in New York City, and is the Chief Innovation Officer at howgood.com, where he managed the world's largest product sustainability database. He develops metrics for Fortune 100, retail and CPG companies that cut through inefficiency and radically transform business decision-making towards sustainability. Ether is also the author of Regenerative Agriculture and Regenerative Enterprise book, which I recommend all of you to read it. They are fascinating books. So actually, I want to ask the first question to Ethan, and once again, I thank you. How do you become a farmer that is so passionate about these issues regarding regeneration and dedicated to regenerative agriculture and regenerative business? How did you went through this path? Can you tell us about that?
Definitely, and thanks for having me on. I'm glad to be on to dig into regenerative agriculture and business and biodiversity and everything we're working with. So I started, I guess I could say, in university. I studied biochemistry, and so I was in a lab, and 4 years. I had a biology degree, but it wasn't real. I couldn't touch it. I couldn't hold it. And so when I finished university, I went out and I won a fellowship that provided for a year of travel and research around the world, focused on apples. So I got to go to Sweden, to Kazakhstan, to Japan, to New Zealand, to Chile, to study the global diversity of apples, from the agricultural diversity, how are different people growing them, to the food diversity, how do different people cook and drink and eat the sweet apple, and then also on the genetic level, the deep, specific biochemical genetic level, what is the global diversity of apples? And that was an incredible journey for me. Really, the heart of it was in Kazakhstan, which is the genetic origin of all apples. 10,000 years ago, there weren't apples anywhere else in the world, only in the Tian Shan Mountains, the Heavenly Mountains that are on the border of what we now call Kazakhstan and China and Kyrgyzstan. And there are apple forests where the apple is the tallest tree in the forest, so 20 meters tall apple trees. And everything around is mega. It's a biodiversity hotspot globally, where there's hundreds of species that have developed there, and it was amazing. Every tree was different. It wasn't like an orchard where you have row upon row of one variety of apple. It was like, this one was red, this one was yellow, this one was blue, this one was orange, this one was green. They all tasted different. And there were also pears, and there were apricots, and there were blueberries, and there were bilberries, and there were strawberries, and there were onions, and there was licorice, all growing in a wild ecosystem there. So I just had a real wake-up to say, wow, we're doing agriculture really wrong if you can produce this much food in this ecosystemic way. And then I would go down the mountains, and there'd be these Soviet-era big straight rows, orchards, airplanes, flying over, spraying chemicals, and it was just a real wake-up for me towards regeneration and towards what agriculture that is regenerative, and ecosystem agriculture looks like. So that set me on the path. I studied permaculture. I started a permaculture design business that was, small at first, doing landscape designs and, helping people in their backyards. Then it grew to start working on farms. Then we got bigger and bigger. We were doing, many 1,000-acre farm designs. We were regenerating sand mines and other damaged landscapes in Barbados and other places around the world, cooperating with local communities, local farmers to regenerate their land. And that was good, but as an entrepreneur, I was always looking for, what is where's the greatest impact? Where can I do the least amount of work for the greatest possible impact and effect? And so I realized that if I was just working with individual pieces of land, this wouldn't be enough. It's not fast enough. I could only do so many a year. So that led me to start thinking about business. And I had founded a company called Regeneration at the time, which is still around and doing great. I'm not an owner of the company anymore, but it's doing amazing work. And many of the publications that Liliana mentioned were put out, when I was at Regeneration. And so we said, well, wait a minute. Instead of just doing individual farms, what if we worked with the businesses, the companies that are buying materials from farms all over the world? What if we could help them evolve their way of working? Then it would touch 100, 1,000, 10,000 farms in one go. And so we started working with large multinational cosmetics corporations. That was very surprising for me. But there's some very interesting ones out there who wanted to transform their whole, what they would have called supply chain, what I think of as a supply system. They wanted to transform that towards regenerative agriculture, towards permaculture. And so we helped them develop a multi-million-dollar fund to invest into their supply system so that the growers, the producers could actually, improve the way they were working and the outcomes that was happening on the ground. And that was a real key. I saw, okay, here, working with one company, I can have this massive global effect, 50 different countries, 3,000 different materials that they were purchasing. From there, I realized that, okay, business is this key. The scale of business, the speed at which business works is very exciting and interesting to me. The flow of financial capital, the flow of money, the investment decisions, that is more than most other things, in my opinion, what's moving and shifting the world. And so, okay, how do I work with that system? How do I evolve the capacity and capability of that system? So my current work sort of builds on that, which we'll talk a little bit more about as we go. But I think there's some key highlights on the journey. Oh, you're muted.
I have to unmute it. So I'm curious to know, by managing one of the world's largest product sustainability database and by developing metrics for Fortune 100, what, in your opinion, can business do to radically transform business decision-making towards regeneration in a very pragmatic way, as we like it?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the keys. Business is not long-winded, touchy-feely, slow consensus process. Business is fast. Business makes decisions. There's different forms of doing it, different governance mechanisms, but pragmatic is key. And one of the best things, I was just looking, one person that I admire their thinking, though disagree with a lot, but really like the way they think, is a guy named Nassim Nicholas Taleb, who wrote Anti-Fragile, and has some very interesting things about if you want to have an impact on the world, instead of starting a nonprofit or doing, working a social cause, he said, go start a business. Go actually figure out how to provide value to someone so that they want to pay you for it. And the pressure of that, the reality of that, will lead you, especially if you can imbue in the business some regenerative ways of thinking, to work from a regenerative paradigm and not just try to do regenerative agriculture, right? That's great. We can talk about that, increase soil carbon, build biodiversity, improve water, improve livelihoods. That's really good. You should do that. That's regenerative agriculture. But it's more important to figure out, how do I work in a regenerative way? Okay, and pragmatism is very key there. It has to be practical, has to be tangible. You have to move things forward. And so one of the things that I do in my current position, so I work at How Good. How Good is a global sustainability intelligence platform where we gather information, we gather data on products, especially food and health and beauty and cleaning, but also textiles, also basically any products, electronics, anything that you could buy. We understand the global impacts of any individual decision, of any ingredient. If you're buying a chocolate bar, yeah, that has cacao butter and cacao solids and some sugar in it, and that's all it says on the back: cacao butter, cacao solids, sugar, maybe a little natural flavor. That chocolate bar is having a significant negative impact on the world. The greenhouse gases it emits where the cacao is being grown, the people who are unfortunately still in child and slave labor situations in parts of West Africa where 70% of cacao is grown. There's real challenges with that. And so we map this data globally. So we have the world's largest product sustainability database. There's over 1 million individual products in the database. We track 127 different sustainability attributes. Across those 1 million products, there's 33,000 different ingredients and chemicals that we track. And so what we can do is we can basically take all of this information, which can be quite overwhelming, and we can figure out how to put it in the hand of a decision maker, whether that's you as an eater, as a consumer shopping, or whether that is a product formulator, somebody who's actually designing or innovating products at the large companies like a Danone or a General Mills, or whether it's a small company figuring out where do I get my stuff to make a new almond butter or to make a new cheese. We can put the tools in their hands so that just with a few clicks, they can see the impact they're going to have. They can see, wow, would it be better to get a fair trade certification on my cacao? Would that actually move the labor risks? Would it be better to get an organic certification or to actually get the cacao from Ecuador instead of getting it from Cote d'Ivoire? So very quickly we can put the tools in people's hands to make those decisions about whatever they are designing and developing. So I guess, to respond to your question, the big data itself isn't what's valuable. It's how you make it useful to the specific people, to the exact use case, and how they can actually make actionable decisions with it. That's really the key. That's what we figured out how to do, is to not give you the same interface as we give Danone, to not give an investor the same interface as we would offer to a farmer, but to say, what's really core about how you make decisions, and how can we give you the easy differentiation, the easy choices, so that you can make decisions towards greater ecological and social regeneration.
You have some kind of example that you can share with us, actually, where you saw the difference of the improvement of having that kind of data?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I can talk about, so one of How Good's primary offerings is that we partner with retailers. So we partner with grocery stores, especially, to help them communicate of all the 25,000 or 30,000 products in a big grocery store in the US. How do you as a consumer make a choice? So how, you're looking at the eggs and you see there's cage-free, there's free range, there's free roaming, there's pasture-based, there's non-GMO, there's organic, and do you know the difference between all of them and how to make the decision? No, it's too complex. There's too much. There's a phenomenon where there's over 400 different labels or certifications that you could put on a food package. And that's too much. That's too confusing for most people. That's too confusing for the buyers at the retailers who are putting this stuff on the shelf. And so what we did is we super simplified it. We took 417 different data sources and certifications and rolled it up to a single word, a single score that we put on every single product in the whole store. And those words, they're not like out of 10 points, because that actually gets confusing too. Is 5.1 better than 5.7? I don't know. Forget this. So what we did is we really simplified it, and the stickers that we put up, and by the way, these are not a certification that goes on a product. So it's not like yet another one of those tags. It's right next to the price tag. So you're in the store, you see the price tag, and then you see this little sticker that says good, great, or best. Very simple. Very, very simple. You don't need to think much about it. You just say, oh, this one's good. Oh, that one's great. This one's the best. I'll grab it. And we don't put anything on the 75% of food that, according to us, basically doesn't meet our standards, is the bottom 75%. Because good, that's the top 25%. Great, that's the top 15%. Best, that's the top 5%. But we don't say, these cookies, they're terrible. Don't eat them. And we don't put any red marks on it because that just people don't react to that. They feel like you're attacking them and what they like. So we just show the highest performers.
Okay.
And that produces a striking change in consumer behavior. If you put a best rated sticker on something, the sales jump 230%.
Okay. So actually, I'm curious because I'm part of the conscious capitalism movement, which is a movement regarding conscious business. And one of the things that the conscious movement look at it is when actually companies that do conscious business and have conscious practice, actually they are more profitable.
Absolutely.
So, in a sense, regarding your experience, you have that experience, for example, that companies and from food companies and farmers that actually do regenerative and sustainable practice, they are more profitable too?
Well, I just want to tease apart a few things that you said. Sustainable is very different than regenerative.
Yeah, I know.
We don't talk about the practices, especially in regeneration, because there's no such thing as a regenerative practice.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah.
A practice is a thing that you do, but it has different outcomes.
Mm-hmm,
So the only way you can check if it's actually having a regenerative effect is by seeing the outcomes in the nested system that it's part of. So it's not the case that, if you just say, oh, we have sustainable agriculture in our products, that doesn't mean you're going to do better because you may just be greenwashing. Right? You may be saying sustainable but not actually doing anything. Those products that objectively, scientifically, have moved the furthest towards regeneration. I don't think there's any regenerative products out there. Maybe one or two, maybe a handful, but not very many. But we do see that those who have moved the furthest towards it are outperforming their categories. They are doing better in the grocery store. They are doing better in the market than the ones that haven't gone that way. And that's backed up by data from NYU and IRI. You can see the sale of the products that are marketed in this way. Those sales are increasing. They're not only beating the average, they're beating it at a greater and greater rate every year. So definitely our data has shown that moving towards regeneration will, especially now, this wasn't the case 10 years ago, especially now as the world gets a little more woke, as people start to look for transparency, as they start to look for regeneration, for soil health, for biodiversity, the sales of those products are increasing. And the great thing is, just to wrap this story up, you asked me for the example, grocery stores make more money by giving people this information, right? Because they are actually being transparent. They're showing the good stuff that they have on the shelves. And people then actually end up purchasing more, and some of those products have a higher margin for the farmers. They're not necessarily more expensive, but they have a higher margin for the farmers, they have a higher margin for the retailers. So the sales in retail stores go up, and usually, we don't charge companies, we don't charge farmers anything for these ratings. For these simple ratings that go in the grocery store, we feel like, everyone should have them, should have access to them. We ask retailers to pay us a small amount per store per year, and they usually make back that investment in 3 to 4 days. And so it's a win-win-win. The best producers sell more of the more regenerative products. The retailer makes more by giving this information to consumers, and the consumers get healthier, more biodiverse, more positive impact in their food.
So taking that into consideration, how can regenerative agriculture contribute to a revolution in food and beauty and fashion, as you call it?
So this is the key thing, is that the vast majority, 99.99999% of the products that we all currently use, of these headphones I'm using, of the shirt I'm wearing, they come from degenerative agriculture. They come from agriculture that is extractive, that has done significant amounts of damage in the last 100 years, especially to ecosystems, to communities, to animals. And so a lot of the work in the last 30, 40 years has been, how do we decrease the harm? How do we reduce the damage that's been done? Can we make our agriculture more efficient? Can we use less water or less pesticides? Can we till the soil less? And so all of that, which is usually called sustainability, comes from a paradigm of do less harm. How do I make this less bad? This is not revolutionary. This is just doing a little less bad. This is like if you have stuck a knife into someone, this is saying, well, I've made it 50% more efficient, and so that means I pulled the knife out 50%. And that's originally that image is originally attributed to Malcolm X, I believe. If we've made a 70%, even a 90% more efficient system, we've just pulled the knife out 90%, but this knife is still in the person. So we need something that's actually different than that. We got to get the knife out all the way. We have to, and many people talk about that. They say, well, we want to get to net zero. Let's get to sustainable. The UN's, Sustainable Development Goal says, how do we, produce food? How do we have an economy in a way that does not harm the ability of the future to have that? That's still trying to get to no impact. Net zero. That's not enough. So when you step over that line, then you go, okay, what if we actually added value? What if we did good? What if we could regenerate as opposed to just do less bad? And so this is the revolution, is that we now have, from all forms of agriculture in all places in the world, we know that there are ways to regenerate the ecosystem, regenerate the soil, regenerate communities through the agriculture while still being profitable. And so that's the shift. That's what everybody's so excited about, because it's so tangible. Who doesn't want to actually do good instead of doing less bad? And I actually think regenerative agriculture can go much further than just doing good. But even that switch is revolutionary. So now we're starting to see larger and larger scale production of agricultural goods. Even palm oil. Right? Everybody hates palm oil because it has done so much damage in so many ways. And all the sustainable palm oil has just done less harm. But there's a way you can grow. Palm is not a bad tree. It's an incredible plant. You can grow it in a complex agroforestry system with multiple crops. You can add carbon to the soil. You can increase biodiversity. So when you make that switch, it's like, okay, great. Now everything that comes from palm oil, anything that goes into food, anything that's made into a surfactant, that goes into a lipstick, or that goes into a body wash, that can come from a regenerative source. So then, if you can actually get products to where everything they're sourcing from is having a regenerative impact, then buying things is great. It's good. Products, we shift this whole thing from, okay, how do we do less harm, to, wow, my purchases could actually be regenerating communities and ecosystems around the world. And that will revolutionize the food we eat. That will revolutionize the beauty, the products that we put on. That'll revolutionize our clothing. So it's very exciting, and there's a huge momentum now building in the business world around it.
So the issue is not so much the what, but the how we do it.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, there's some shortcuts by changing the what, right? But yes, in general, anything, you can get it through a different way of working and a different way of thinking about how you're working, can get it to regenerative. But, sometimes it does make sense to switch from something that's based on an annual agricultural tillage to something that is grown by a tree, for example. You're just going to have a much faster time sequestering carbon through a mango or through a chestnut than you are through corn, which requires annual agriculture and tillage. Not to say corn's bad. There's lots of regenerative corn as well, but there are some shortcuts you can take along the way in regeneration.
Just to mention, you mentioned some stores regarding those products. Actually, there's a person that is listening to us that is asking the name of the stores. I don't know if you can help us.
Sure. So if you go to howgood.com, you can see some of our partners and some of the stores that we've worked with. One of our major partners in the United States is Ahold Delhaize. They are a larger conglomerate group that has 2,000 stores in the United States and 4,000 in Europe. And so some of their banners have implemented the How Goods rating system in store. And the other thing is that if you want to get information, access to the rating system, there is a smartphone app. You can just download the How Goods rating app, and then you can just barcode scan a product and for free and get access to this information wherever
great.
you are.
Oh, great. So actually, I think Luis has a question for you right now. I'm going to pass the word to him.
Please. You have to unmute.
Considering this tangible aspect of regenerative purposes or values, how can a regenerative-driven economy awaken and nurture in individuals in general a stronger spirit of entrepreneurship, empowering them to take matters into their own hands of seeking answers to solutions to pressing matters of their own time? And vice versa, how can the entrepreneur spirit lead individuals and society to a more regenerative-driven economy?
Yeah, it's got to be the second one. The first one doesn't work because you can't rely on the economy to do something for you. Yeah, you have to take the initiative. You who are listening to this call and anyone who will listen to it later, you have to be the one that starts it. Otherwise, you're relying on somebody else to do the work, to make the economy regenerative. We're not going to get a regenerative economy that way. You actually have to be the one that picks it up and works with it. If you want to really, there's very little out there that has been written on the regenerative economy that is actually coming from a regenerative paradigm. There's some thinking from sort of earlier paradigms, from net positive, from human potential. It's all about collaboration and co-creation and thriving, which is great. I love that stuff. It's really useful, but not actually coming from a regenerative paradigm. So just recently, there's a new collaborative that's starting to write. They're posting mainly on Medium. That's called the Regenerative Economy Collaborative. And they have written some of the deepest stuff, the deepest thinking about what a regenerative economy actually looks like and how we get there. And so I would, for a real deep understanding of the different paradigms and then how we as individuals can start moving from it. It's not as simple as saying entrepreneurial, because entrepreneurial could mean a lot of things. I could be an extractive entrepreneur, right? I could figure out how to be an entrepreneur and extract a huge amount of value by mining or by enslaving people and making a lot of money out of it. That could still be entrepreneurialism, but in an extractive way. So, but that said, if you are going to figure out how to work from a regenerative paradigm, some of what it takes to be an entrepreneur, that internal locus of control where I'm the one that gets to choose what I do, I'm the one that gets to choose how I react to things coming at me, as opposed to an external locus of control where the government did this to me, or COVID happened and so I collapsed, right? You have to come from personal agency, from my ability to see, here's where I want to go. Yes, the world has shifted. It's always shifting. It always will. There's no such thing as a get back to normal. It never was normal. And so we have to say, how do I grasp that disruption and then focus myself on creating what I want to create and aiming towards actual regeneration. And regeneration doesn't just mean doing good. It doesn't just mean biodiversity gets better. Regeneration means you evolve the capacity of the system that you're working with. Whatever system that is. I work on agriculture, I work on business, I work on investment. I work really at the intersection of those three, and I'm seeking to evolve the capacity of that system to see itself and to make itself better over time. So whatever system you're working with, regeneration means you're not just doing good or being a successful entrepreneur. You're evolving the capacity of the system you work with. You're growing, you're developing it to grow itself over time. The other thing that I think is key to think about for a regenerative economy, and I think we'll touch on this also a bit later, is that the regenerative economy does not look the same any place. It's totally different wherever you are. Each person evolves based on their own essence, what's unique to them. It evolves based on their own place, what's unique to your, people would say like a watershed. I like to say more like a life shed, because when you say watershed, it makes it so that water is this separate thing, and then there's a food shed, which is over here, and that's ridiculous. They're all the same. So I just say a life shed. So each life shed is unique. It has its own things to offer. It has its own delicious foods that don't grow anywhere else. It's got its own varieties of apples for its own cider, right? And so each entrepreneur in each place needs to connect with what is unique about my place, what is unique about me, and how do I express that in order to evolve the capacity of the system even further. I'm not sure. Did I answer your question, Luis? Did that help?
Yeah, sure. It makes a lot of sense. And so, since you mentioned cooperation between entrepreneurs, how can businesses replace that Darwinian dogma of survival of the fittest and competition for the best outcome with a more a cooperative evolution, or an encouragement and mutual help between different stakeholders? Can that happen?
I don't necessarily think that needs to happen or should happen. I'm not sure. I don't think that a just straight cooperative is necessarily the way to go. Because one thing it does is it often holds people to whatever the sort of medium or average where everyone can work at is, and that actually goes against what I was just saying of each individual business, each individual enterprise expressing its own essence from its own place and innovating based on that. So it's not to say cooperation isn't good. I think part of being a regenerative business is understanding the system that you're working with, but it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to work with everyone in the system or always cooperate or always share resources. Really, you should be all asking in your own way, how do I evolve this system? How do I evolve business? How do I evolve fooding, the process of fooding, or the process of sheltering? Some of you are architects, yeah? So the process of sheltering is not just how do I design a building, right? It's this whole long value-adding process over time. And so if you are working on sheltering, on everything from the tree that grew the wood that was processed to go into the house that houses the education center that educates the next generation of architects and designers, when you can see that whole process, you don't necessarily have to just cooperate with all the other architects who are thinking that way. That won't necessarily get to the best outcome, because then you got to do a lot of meetings, you got to talk, you got to get shared values and goals. That takes a lot of time and is going to stop you from actually being effective as a business person in some cases, not all cases. And so I think it's much more juicy and fun to invite each business to see the whole system, understand each other, understand the niches, and say, what do I do uniquely? What can I offer into this whole process of sheltering that is unique, that really captivates individual customers, individual people who want to do that? And then we get this great diversity, actually, right? Like if we're one of the things that happens in so-called cooperative models is that there's a sort of a flattening, or you're supposed to like do away with hierarchy and everybody's at the same level and everybody's voice counts, which, yes, that's true. It's very useful in many ways, but that also, you lose a little bit of like the uniqueness of each business, of each person, of each ancestral story of place. And so I think there's really great potential in focusing on uniqueness and how do you express that essence. I'm not saying you should do that and kill off everybody else. It's not that cutthroat competition, but I don't think just going from competition to cooperation is enough of an answer. I think we need a more nuanced way to think about and look at how do you actually build a successful business. And I've been wrong about that in the past. I wrote a whole book that was about designing what I call enterprise ecosystems with my co-author Gregory Landway from Terragenesis, which I mentioned earlier. And I didn't understand a lot. That was all 7-8 years ago, and I made some proposals that were more towards cooperative resource sharing ecosystems. But I don't think those can be kind of designed a priori in the way we proposed in the book. And much more of this express uniqueness of self to evolve the capacity of the system. That's where I'm working now in terms of regeneration.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
So how do you see, I really was interested about your view on investment, conscious investment. And I want to know, how do you view collaboration between, the South, which has always been explored areas like, Mexico, Latin America, Africa. How do you see the shift of the capital there is available in the world to these places so we can reach the technological and academic levels to be able to operate sophisticated systems in a way that put us in
It's a lot in this question. There's a whole bunch of stuff in this question.
Of power dynamics, that really kind of comes to an equality. My concrete question is, and looking at, your view on the development of projects according to how the system looks, how do you see international investments go into the system to actually help regenerate their culture, regenerate their resources, and gain a sense of equality?
So much to respond to. No, it's good. It's a beautiful question. I would first of all start by saying, yes, that should happen. Investment should be focused on how do I support and develop and evolve the capacity of a place, of a unique place, of a unique peoples to express what's most core to them and to develop in their own way. I don't think we want everyone to get to the so-called sophistication and industrialization, aka the kind of mindless gray masses where everybody wears the same suit and thinks the same. Like we don't want that. So I think I don't think there's a lot of it happening yet. Is one thing to say. I think there are a number of organizations that are starting to think about what the best way to do that and how you would have investment criteria to check, is this actually evolving the capacity of the people to express what's unique about their lifeshed, about their bioregion, or is this just trying to scale an idea that works somewhere else and, now we can go do it in Brazil, or now we can go do it in Africa. So I would say there's not a huge amount of examples yet. I do have a list of funds, of investment funds that are focused, at least in name, on regenerative agriculture and regenerative forestry. They're relatively few, but they have a higher chance and probability of doing this, of heading in the direction that you're saying. I think in many ways the investments can come from anywhere. It doesn't have to come from the global north to the global south. And a lot of really exciting things are happening with people in their own communities investing in themselves and sort of developing their own businesses, developing their own cooperatives. So, I mean, there's a number of different examples to sort of point to. I mean, I'm thinking of one project in Mexico that's working with pine forestry and thousands of acres of pine forestry and how to develop individual value-added goods out of the resin that comes out of the pine. And I don't know, everywhere I look, there's different smaller scale examples. I think focusing on smaller scale investments is going to yield a lot more than larger scale. And then at the same time, there's a story from Investing in Regenerative Agriculture. Is a great podcast to check out that really focuses on this question, but that's looking at a major European bank investing in a province in India, doing zero budget natural farming, which is this very grassroots, ground up, farmers teaching farmers, no inputs, and they put something like $200 billion behind this. So not like small amounts, huge amounts, to develop this across hundreds of thousands of farmers in a whole province in India. So there are examples out there. I guess one of my mentors would say, the future is here. It just isn't evenly distributed yet.
Yeah.
Right? And so I feel like there are places out there, and I would generally encourage anyone who's thinking about or working on investment to go with some of what you said. how can I invest, not so that I'm getting my financial capital return. How can I invest with the multi-capital model, whatever multi-capital model you want to use? I have an 8-capital one, that's great. But there's others out there, it doesn't really matter. Use one of them and say, how can I invest in a way that actually grows the capacity of those I'm investing in to develop their own businesses and their own investment funds, right? Am I actually investing in something?
Or even, I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, please.
At this stage, I think just thinking in kind of big terms, if there were, right now, we depend on tourism, and right now capital is very scarce here. We depend like 100% on tourism, literally. So, and we have to bring goods in the island all the time. There is a market for agriculture to become a common activity for small entrepreneurs, you know? And even like we could really have an investor say, I'm going to get a bit of it, but, you know, have terms where the small farmers can also make a living, and that this is attractive for the destination to make people want to come to the island where they grow organic food.
That'd be great.
You know, I think it's, as long as it makes sense in business, it doesn't have to have this hugely impressive goals, but just as everybody is getting enough money, because there's not enough money for people here to survive. That's even the thing.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, people don't eat money. And one of the great things that I've seen on several islands that I've worked on is that when economic shocks happen, you can look at Cuba as an example of this, it actually pushes the community, it pushes people to remember how to be self-reliant, how to grow their own food, and do it in a very effective way. Now, making the jump to creating business cases that are investable from that, that's a different thing that needs work. It needs somebody thinking systemically about how do we craft that, and how do we do that in a way that doesn't end up that the investor wants to come in and extract value back out of it. There are so many opportunities. You gave an awesome one for a particular island, but everywhere has that. You just have to figure out what it is uniquely in that place, and don't try to copy an investment model from somewhere else to make it work.
Totally. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Where else can we go today?
So actually I have some comments of Amanda and Sharon in the chat. So I'm going to just let you know what they are, okay? And you can comment in a way before Sophia asks you the last question and we come forward with it. Actually, Sharon agrees with you when you said about the entrepreneurial thing, but he says that very well, said that initiative and collaboration, but we don't have to do it alone. Entrepreneurial can be together. So in a way, actually, just to point it out, was sharing with us too. And Amanda also says that she will suggest that collaboration and cooperation in a cooperative does not deem the uniqueness and unique value of any person or organization. I don't know if you want to comment their comments, but
I like that people are pushing back. That's good. That means I'm touching something. That's fun. Yeah, I mean, I think those are great points. I don't necessarily disagree with them. I don't disagree with them. I think too often people misunderstanding that uniqueness and don't have, to one of the first point there, don't have a community of practice that is effective at continuing to disrupt and grow yourself and grow your ability to express what's unique to you. And I think I don't necessarily think of that as collaboration or cooperation, because you're not necessarily doing anything together, but getting together to help each other think and always be improving your way of thinking, that can be very, very useful. But I want to distinguish that from actually doing things together, which sometimes makes a lot of sense. I mean, you can look at the Japanese keiretsu systems of cooperative ownership, which are very fascinating in how they've stitched a bunch of businesses together for cooperation. And there's so many examples of cooperatives that are doing great work in the world. So I don't want to say not that, but I'm aiming at this particular point that I often find missing around the way that we're focusing on what's unique and what's our unique value proposition and how to bring that out into the world. But thank you. Love the comments.
I think Monica has requested the mic.
Oh, yeah, but we'll just have the Sophia effect. Just have the Sophia question first, okay? We please that Monica ask the question, writing down it's better, okay, than enter with the micro at this moment, okay? Because we're finishing the session, so it's better for writing.
Sophia, what you got?
So the question is, it's about the economy. So what would an economy that view a healthy holistics look like? Is how translates the holistic to reality in the practice?
Oh, it's so much fun. It's so beautiful and localized. I would say it's like 90. A holistic economy, like an economy that's viewing wealth holistically, is likely about 90% localized. That doesn't mean it's 100%. Doesn't mean you can't ever see anybody. Global trade, has been an incredible feature of humanity for tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of years, depending on where you look for evidence. There's crazy things like in North America, in Minnesota, and even up into Canada, they found cacao beans, right, which came from Guatemala. This is long, long before highways, right? So this global trade of very unique goods that express the essence of the place and that you can take out of that place without cutting down the forest, right? You don't necessarily need to cut teak from somewhere and bring it to Europe or bring it to Africa in order to work with it. You can export something that has the smell, that has the flavor, that has the very beautiful, powerful, the medicinal properties of a place. Those can be our trade goods, our sort of globalized economy. Spices, though it has been a very extractive field, it has this great potential, I think, to keep us connected globally. There's a company that I'm just a customer of. I just love them. It's called Burlap and Barrel. That's a direct trade spice company that has the most exquisite, unique spices from all over the world. And I cook with them every day, and I think about the chile farms in Turkey. I think about the mountains in Afghanistan where the cumin comes from. Like, I think about these beautiful little spices, and yet I'm using those to season the lamb that was born on my farm and raised on the grass in my farm and then I slaughtered on my farm. I'm using them, to spice up the vegetables from my garden. I'm cooking it on a cast iron pot that was designed by somebody that I met locally and manufactured it in Wisconsin. Right, so the vast majority of an economy that is really understanding wealth in a holistic way is localized because of many different reasons having to do with how resources and really how information and community and communication works. If everything is coming from a more local area, or the vast majority of it, there's just a greater degree of accountability, of visibility, of shared understanding about what's happening in that place, and then you can have smaller units of localized, self-governing communities. And what happens, this isn't like a new idea, right? Pre-colonization, pre-industrialization, all of our indigenous ancestors all over the world had economies that looked like this, that acted like this. And they were so diverse. You would go over one mountain or one ridge and down into another, and it would be a different peoples speaking a different language with different foods, different stories. And so that, you can look at there's some great maps of California pre-colonization and genocide there, where you can see how small, how close. There were different peoples, literally they didn't even understand each other's languages right next door. You see that in a few other places in the world, up against the Caucasus Mountains. You see this real deep mixing. And so, each place will be expressing what is unique to it and communicating and trading and getting the flavors and the interest of what's around it. They're not fully isolated, but there's a greater integrity, a greater unity of each little bioregion with its own businesses, its own specialties, its own investment funds, its own way of making multi-capital profitability. How's that, Sophia? Is that
Ethan, can you repeat the name of the company, the spice company that you mentioned before?
Oh, I'm always getting them so many customers. Burlap and Barrel.
Yeah, we have a lot of customers.
It's an excellent company. It connects, they have their own unique essence that they express, and I connect with it, and I love it. I buy their spices. They don't pay me anything. I like their products.
So to wrap it up all this, and since it's been a long day, and thank you so much once again, I just want to question, and we have a poll here, I just want to question you about what you think could be actually a Marnavido role on co-creating a regenerative world, and also the attendees that are here with us, and now in some way, even if it could be not cooperative, but in some way we can do it. What is your opinion about, and also where we can know more about your own projects and your own work? You already mentioned, but if you want to talk a little bit where people can know more about it, just
sure. Sure. So none of those choices will get you a regenerative agriculture. You could choose all of them, and you need a couple other choices. None of those in and of themselves will get you a regenerative agriculture. It is really great to start a garden if you don't have one. You'll learn so much there, and that could get you, it could be a vertical garden, I don't know. But that will get you towards having agricultural companies that are regenerative agriculture companies. So definitely it's useful to have a garden, but that alone won't do it either. And as for what role you should play, I have no idea. I do not know enough about your role in the ecosystem, and what specifically is unique about you and what you have to offer. So we could dig into that at some point. If you want to do a session on that, that'd be fun to record and share with people. It will come out with something that's not like what I've ever said to anybody else before, because you all are, it's your own unique thing. So I don't know in response to that. If you want to dig in further on my thinking about regenerative agriculture business, there's a couple good places to do it. My blog is ethansoloviev.com, and so you can see my writing and thinking there. The little email list that's there is very infrequent because I haven't had a lot of time to write recently, but I usually, if I'm going to post something important, like I've just written a new paper that's about different paradigms of agriculture, which we talked a little bit about here. And so I usually send it to that email list first to get some comments and thoughts and sort of pre-read by folks. So if you're interested in seeing that new white paper on the different paradigms of agriculture, ethansoloviev.com, you can join the mailing list and get it there. We also at How Good are doing an online innovation series. So there's a couple different layers of it, but there's some public talks that are conversations with thought leaders. And the last round we were looking at biodiversity, regenerative agriculture, and planetary health. This next round we're looking at the intersection where regenerative agriculture, biodiversity meets Black, Indigenous, Latina, Asian farming all over the world, and the sort of food products and businesses that emerge from that. So that's going to be the next round of the How Good online innovation series, which is just howgood.com/online. I think that's it. So much more to say on regeneration. I guess I'll say one last little piece, which is there is a global community of practice that's working on regeneration, regenerative business, regenerative agriculture in an ongoing way. You can. I mentioned the Regenerative Economy Collaborative. That's a great place to look, and then that can connect you to Carol Sanford, who's written 5 different books on regenerative business, regenerative entrepreneurship. The Regenerative Life is her most recent book. And there's some communities of practice connected there that have been very powerful for me in continuing to grow and evolve how I think and work.
Great. Thank you so much. Ethan, have a nice day. We're very thankful to have you here and to be with us. So we continue looking at what you are doing, and we accept the challenge that you made to us, and talk some months from now or something like that.
Excellent.
And
Let's do it.
thank you so much once again, and have a great day.
Ciao. Bye.